The night it began was quiet to quiet for the kind of storm that was about to unfold inside our home. I still remember the smell of oil lamps, the faint hiss of kerosene, and the endless buzzing of insects outside our wooden windows. My mother sat in the middle of the floor, her eyes fixed on nothing, lips moving silently as if she were talking to the air. At first, we thought she was just tired, maybe stressed. But as the days passed, something in her began to change, something that didn't belong to her anymore. Her laughter was the first sign. It wasn't the gentle laugh we grew up with. It was sharp, dry, and hollow, like a sound forced out of an empty well. It echoed through the walls, even when she was alone. Then came the rage. She would lash out at anyone near her. It didn't matter who it was, father, me, or my elder brother. Once, she grabbed my father by the throat and screamed words that didn't sound human at all. Her eyes turned so wide, so empty, it was as if someone else was looking through them. We thought she had lost her mind. The neighbors whispered that she had gone mad, but deep inside, we knew madness alone couldn't explain what we were seeing. Because one night, we saw the impossible. It was past midnight. The lamps had burned low, and the air felt heavy, unnaturally still. I woke up to the sound of my mother laughing again. I went to the doorway and froze. There she was, standing near the corner of the room, both her arms lifted high above her head, and she wasn't touching the ground. Her feet hung inches above the floor. Her hair floated as if underwater. A cold, choking dread filled the room. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. She looked down at me, smiled, and in a voice that was not her own, whispered, "You shouldn't be awake." The next thing I remember is my father pulling me out of the room, locking the door behind us. As the laughter grew louder and louder until it turned into a howl, the windows rattled, and something unseen scratched at the walls from inside. For the next few days, she would switch between silence and hysteria. Sometimes she'd sit quietly, her eyes following something invisible across the room. Other times, she'd strike without warning, slapping, clawing, biting anyone who dared come close. Once, she bit her own hand and laughed as blood dripped down her wrist. That's when father said he'd call for a cabaret, a man said to deal with things beyond medicine or reason. Until then, we had to endure the nights listening to her laughter echo through the dark, watching the doors creak open on their own, and feeling that same suffocating presence that lingered even when she wasn't there. But deep inside, I already knew whatever had entered our house wasn't planning to leave easily. And my mother, she was no longer just my mother. She had become something else. The day the cabaret arrived, the air around our house felt heavier than ever before. The birds had stopped singing. Even the dogs in the street stayed silent, as if they knew something unspeakable was waiting inside. My father led him in quietly, his face pale with sleeplessness. The man wasn't what I expected. He was old, thin, and walked with a limp. His eyes were small and deep set, but when he looked at something, it felt like he saw through it, as if the world around him was just a thin curtain. In his hand, he carried a small black bag filled with strange objects, a bundle of herbs, a small copper bowl, and an old bell with dried stains on it. When he entered my mother's room, she was sitting in the corner, staring at the wall. She didn't move, didn't blink. The cabaret took one slow breath and whispered, "She knows I am here." That was when she turned. Her eyes rolled upward until only the whites showed. A low, guttural laugh escaped her throat. Not a human laugh, but something darker, almost animal. The old man didn't flinch. He began to chant in a deep voice, the words unfamiliar and sharp, cutting through the air like blades. The lamp flame trembled violently. My mother screamed. She threw herself backward, hitting the wall so hard that the plaster cracked. Then she stopped moving altogether, just staring straight ahead, her body rigid. The cabaret sprinkled some oil into the copper bowl and set it on fire. The smell was suffocating, a mix of burned herbs and something metallic, like rust and blood. Smoke filled the room, twisting and curling like living shapes. Then the strangest thing happened. The smoke began to form patterns, faint faces, like shadows pressed against glass. They moved around her, whispering, their mouths opening and closing soundlessly. The cabarets voice grew louder. My mother screamed again, clutching her head, begging something unseen to stop. And then silence. The flame went out, The smoke cleared. My mother slumped to the ground, breathing hard. Her eyes looked normal again. She blinked, looked around the room, and asked softly, "What happened?" For the first time in weeks, she sounded like herself. My father cried. We all thought it was over. The cabaret told us to keep her calm and to burn incense at dusk for 7 nights. He said the thing inside her was weakening, that it had been forced out, but not destroyed. For a few days, everything was peaceful. My mother cooked, smiled, even hummed old songs again. The house felt warm, like a home again. We started to believe the nightmare had ended. But on the 8th night, I woke to the sound of laughter again, faint, echoing from my mother's room. That same hollow, lifeless laughter that had haunted us before. When I looked through the half-open door, I saw her sitting on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Her mouth twisted into an inhuman grin, and this time, she was whispering something over and over, as if answering a voice only she could hear. It wasn't over. Whatever had been driven away, had found its way back. When my father told the cabaret that the laughter had returned, the man's face darkened. He didn't seem surprised, only resigned, as if he had expected it all along. He arrived the next morning, carrying more than just his small black bag this time. 2 of his assistants followed, their expressions grim, each holding a bundle wrapped in red cloth. Inside were objects I didn't recognize: bones carved with symbols, black candles, a clay pot sealed with ash. My father asked him quietly, "Didn't you drive it away? Why is it back?" The old man didn't answer immediately. He took a slow breath, then said, "What lives inside her is not a spirit I can simply drive away. It's something old, something that chooses where it stays. It does not just possess, it binds." His words chilled us to the bone. That night, they began again. The chanting, the smoke, the fire. The air was thick with the strange smell, and the shadows on the walls seemed to move on their own. My mother sat on the floor, trembling, her fingers digging into the ground. Suddenly, her body stiffened, and her head turned sharply toward the cabaret. "You think your words can hold me?" The voice that came from her mouth was not hers. It was deeper, layered like 2 voices speaking at once. "You don't know what you're dealing with." The cabaret stepped closer, holding a piece of cloth covered in strange markings. "Then speak your name," he demanded. "If you are so strong, speak it." She smiled, or rather, it smiled through her. Her lips twisted wider and wider until the corners of her mouth tore and blood began to drip. Her eyes rolled back, and from her throat came a sound like 1,000 whispers overlapping. The flame in the lamp flickered violently. The walls groaned. Something unseen pushed against the ceiling, hard enough to make the dust fall like rain. The assistants began their own chant, louder and louder, trying to drown the sound of her laughter. One of them collapsed, screaming that something cold had gripped his neck. The other began shaking uncontrollably, his eyes wide with terror. And then, suddenly, everything stopped. The silence that followed was unbearable. My mother sat motionless, eyes empty, blood still trickling from her mouth. The cabaret wiped his forehead and said quietly, "It's not gone. It's watching." He turned to my father. "You must understand this thing. It feeds on fear. It's ancient. It doesn't just want to torment, it wants to stay. I can hold it back, weaken it, but to truly contain it, I will need more than words. I'll need others." That night, after they left, none of us slept. My mother stayed quiet, her breathing slow, her eyes half open, as if she was awake even in her dreams. And I could swear I saw the curtain near her bed move, though there was no wind. In the dark, I heard it faint but unmistakable, a whisper, soft and cold, right next to my ear. "She's mine now." The cabaret returned 3 nights later, but this time, he was not alone. 6 others came with him, all men of different ages, each wearing white robes marked with black ash symbols. They spoke little, their faces blank, their eyes tired from knowing too much. They carried drums, clay pots, candles, and strange wooden idols wrapped in red threads. That evening, my father sealed every door and window with cloth soaked in holy oil. He told us not to look, not to speak, and under no condition to enter my mother's room until they said it was over. But I couldn't listen. Fear and curiosity held me tighter than any warning could. I hid behind the hallway curtain, just close enough to see through the half-open door. Inside, My mother sat in the middle of the floor. Her hair was loose, her head bowed, her breath uneven, like she had been waiting for them. The moment the cabaret stepped in, she started to laugh again, louder than before, like something deep inside her was celebrating. "So," she hissed, without looking up, "you brought more toys to play with?" The oldest, Cabaret, raised his hand, and the others began to beat the drums, slow at first, then faster. Their chants filled the room, low and rhythmic, echoing like a pulse. The shadows danced along the walls. The air thickened until it was hard to breathe. My mother suddenly lifted her head and her eyes were completely black. Not the black of darkness, the black of nothingness. She began to float again, her body rising from the ground, her hair whipping around like a storm. The lamps flickered and blew out one by one. The windows rattled even though they were sealed. From somewhere deep inside her voice came, shrill and cruel. "You cannot bind what was never free." One of the cabarets collapsed, blood running from his nose. Another screamed that something was crawling beneath his skin. The lead cabaret shouted louder, chanting faster, forcing the others to follow. Their voices clashed with the thing's laughter, filling the house with chaos and thunder. Suddenly, the wind started a violent gust that shouldn't have existed inside a closed room. The doors shook, the roof creaked, and every candle burst at once. The entire room was thrown into darkness, then light. The cabaret raised a small metal bowl burning with blue fire. He began to pour its contents into a clay jar, muttering words that sounded older than language itself. My mother screamed not in pain, but in fury. The voice that came out wasn't hers. It was dozens of voices, all shouting at once, echoing through the walls and beyond. The windows slammed open by themselves. Every door in the house banged against its frame. Plates shattered, mirrors cracked, and through it all, she screamed, "You think you can hold me? I've lived in fire. I've walked through death. You are nothing." But the cabaret didn't stop. His voice rose higher and higher until his throat bled. The others formed a circle around her, chanting faster, shaking their hands above the blue flame. The sound grew unbearable, like 1,000 storms in one small room. Then, with a deafening crack, the lamps flared back to life. My mother collapsed to the floor, motionless. The air went still. The cabaret bent over her, whispering something I couldn't hear. Then he lifted the clay jar now sealed with black wax and said quietly, "It's done." He turned to my father and said, "Inside this jar lies what was living within her. It is bound now, but never destroyed. You must never open it. Never." They packed their things in silence, their faces pale with exhaustion and fear. As they left, I heard one of them whisper, "No man should have to keep such a thing." That night, my father took the jar and walked out into the dark. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He didn't take a light. Only the sound of his footsteps echoed down the road until it faded completely. He returned an hour later, his hands empty. When we asked what he did with the jar, he just said, "Don't ask. It's better you don't know." When dawn finally came, the world outside looked the same. The same trees, the same sky, the same quiet morning air. But inside our home, everything felt different. It was as if something had been lifted from the walls, a pressure that had been pressing down on us for months, suddenly gone. My mother lay asleep on the bed. For the first time in what felt like forever, her face looked peaceful. No more twitching lips, no wild eyes, just calm. Her breathing was slow and even, her hands folded neatly on her chest. We sat around her in silence, waiting for her to wake up. My father hadn't spoken a word since he came back with empty hands the night before. There was something in his eyes, something heavy, something he couldn't say aloud. When I looked at him, it told he'd seen something out there in the dark. Hours passed. The cabaret and his men were long gone. The house was quiet, too quiet. No whispers, no laughter, no footsteps from empty rooms. Only the faint hum of morning insects and the crackle of a dying lamp. Then, just before noon, my mother stirred. Her eyes opened slowly. She blinked, looked around, and for a moment seemed confused, like she had woken from a dream she couldn't remember. "Where am I?" she whispered. Father rushed to her side, his voice trembling. "You're home. You're safe now. She looked at him, really looked as if seeing him for the first time in years. And then tears filled her eyes. "I saw things," she said weakly. "Dark things. I was screaming, but no one could hear me. It wasn't me talking. It wasn't me hurting you." Father held her hand. "It's over now," he said softly. But there was something about the way he said it, quiet and certain, that made me wonder if he truly believed it. Over the next few days, everything began to return to normal. My mother walked again, cooked again, smiled again. The villagers who once whispered about her now came to see her, amazed by her recovery. They called it a miracle. We tried to believe it too. But sometimes, late at night, when the lamps were dim and everyone else was asleep, I'd catch my father sitting alone by the window staring into the darkness outside, as if he was waiting for something. When I asked him once what he was looking for, he just shook his head. "Listening," he said. "Just listening." I didn't understand what he meant then. A few months passed. Life went on. My mother was completely normal. The laughter never came back, nor did the strange behavior. It was as if none of it had ever happened. Until one rainy night, I woke up to a soft tapping sound. Tap, tap, like someone lightly knocking on glass. The sound was coming from the far end of the house, near the old storage shed. Father wasn't in his bed. I called out, but no answer. I grabbed a lamp and went outside. The wind howled, rain slicing across the yard. And then I saw him, standing in front of the shed, completely still, staring at something in the mud. His shoulders were trembling. "Father," I called. He turned slowly, his face pale, rainwater running down his cheeks. His eyes looked hollow, almost afraid. "It's back," he whispered. My heart froze. "What do you mean? What's back?" He didn't answer. He just pointed toward the ground. There, half buried in the wet earth, was a small clay jar, the same kind the cabaret had sealed that night. The black wax around its mouth was cracked. The rainwater had washed away, the ashes drawn over it. The seal was broken, and as thunder rolled across the sky, I swear I heard it faint, muffled, coming from inside the jar, that same laughter, the one I thought we'd never hear again. Father dropped to his knees, clutching his head, whispering prayers through his teeth. The jar rattled once, then stopped. The air around us felt colder than the rain itself. When we looked up, we saw a figure standing in the doorway of the house. My mother. Her hair was wet, clinging to her face. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't crying, but her eyes, they were completely black again. She tilted her head slowly, as if listening to something we couldn't hear. Then she whispered, in that same voice we thought was gone forever, "You shouldn't have buried it there." The lamp flickered, the wind died, and before the darkness swallowed everything, heard it again. That deep, mocking laughter that once filled our walls. The nightmare hadn't ended. It had only been waiting. The end. Did you enjoy the story? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Horror Dream. Want more stories like this? Subscribe to The Horror Dream, and we'll bring you more darkness, just for you. If you enjoy a little chill down your spine, stick around, like, share, and hit that subscribe button, right here on The Horror Dream. Your support keeps us going, so stay with us. Subscribe to The Horror Dream for more spine-tingling tales.